techniques for developing spiritual knowing. Originally, it had been, kind of ancient and modern techniques for looking at these things. And I do want to talk about that because I've noticed that everybody, they've talked about their research and what they're doing and what they're doing in their the PhDs and so on. My area, I'm looking at a very ancient text. I'm a classicist. That's what I'm doing. But my background is very diverse, so it incorporates quite a lot of things such as mystical practices, transcendental experience, anthropology, and a huge area of esoteric traditions. So what I want to talk about today is that going to happen? Is it going to happen?
I don't know.
Maybe I'm just going to
Okay.
do it. I'll just go up, do I?
Yeah.
Go down. Okay.
Yeah.
For discussion today, introverted and extroverted practices, sitting in the power, and ancient world, modern world practices. And one thing that I wanted to just to bring into the discussion was the differences in results that people experience when they expand their awareness out into nature, when they expand their consciousness out into the universe and so on, in comparison to when people start to focus within, such as focusing on the heart centre, focusing on the breathing, focusing on the third eye, or any other area within the body. And I started to look at various areas of differences because looking at a particular text, I'm looking at a text called the Chaldean Oracles, and that was believed written in the late 2nd century, and it was written by a father and son team. The father as an invoker or the person leading the ritual, and the son believed in an entranced state, in the same way that modern mediums or trance mediums work in an entranced state, in many cases, not always, but it's certainly within the trance phenomena that there is this sense of going into this depth of awareness, where another mind is thought to speak through and reveal information from another reality. And in the case of the Chaldean Oracles, this particular material was brought through from the ancient god Apollo and the goddess Hecate, and also in some respects the spirit of the long dead Plato. And I know you're going to go, oh God, yes, really. But the thing is that until the late 1940s, it was thought that these areas were, kind of, oh, I don't know, is it real, is it not real? What was going on? Is it some kind of corner? What was going on? So the fact that they are actually oracular practices is something very significant. So this idea of extroverted techniques, this is the sense of expanding our awareness out into consciousness, out into the world, out into nature, beyond ourselves, using techniques that may include prayer, chanting, perhaps singing, the listening to sacred texts, and in more shamanic cultures, things such as drumming and dance and all of these sorts of things which take us away from our physical self. And this is a particular practice that was looked at, particularly it's come to Evelyn Underhill, and it's been researched by W.T. Stace and various other people, that they've seen the differences, that the results that we get when we are seeking knowledge from an external source, whether experiencing an idea of teachings from God, teachings from a higher power, from guides, or whatever our terminology we feel comfortable with, because that's not always comfortable terminology to some people. But this idea of universal guidance is very strong and goes back to ancient times. Certainly looking into very ancient cultures. But looking at the work of people such as Plotinus and other people in the Neoplatonic milieu, I want to bring in this idea of sitting in the power which developed. I'm moving on like a, let's not go there yet. So, I look at a PowerPoint, I think, what did I put that there for? Looking at this idea of the extroverted energy and allowing something beyond us to give us teachings or to give us some inspiration of which way next. This is an area that Plotinus worked on. And in his work, he did have this idea of starting from, and I'm going to move ahead. There we go. Well, this is Plotinus. And from 204 to 270 in the Common Era. And he didn't have a god. He was a really interesting character because he's believed the father of Neoplatonism. And he evolved this system of communication, receiving wisdom from what he referred to as the one, or Tochen. And in this tradition of ancient Greece, he went beyond the idea of classical gods. He went beyond the idea of the ancient tradition of going to the temple, doing what they refer to as nomoi, or the traditions of our ancestors, that we do because our ancestors did it and we're just keeping up with the tradition. He started to work with students who started to kind of connect with this idea of the transcendent God, the invisible God. Very comparable to the idea of the Jewish tradition of God, which evolved maybe a little later than that, because we have a little controversy about the development of the transcendent God in the Jewish tradition and the development of the transcendent God in the Greek tradition. So we're looking at also the divine intellect, or nous. It's the image of the one, and also called being, spirit, realm of ideas, or realm of forms. And it was believed that the one was beyond all of that. It was beyond being, beyond an identity. So in connecting with God, in connecting with this higher power, that we're really going into a state of emptiness, a state of no mind. Similar to in perhaps some of the Upanishads, where we talk about Brahman, we talk about this experience of melting or dissolving into the universe. And really feeling as if you are becoming empty or dissolving. You and yourself are disappearing. Your physical world, and you that has a kind of a life, and your ego and the things that make you tick, all dissolve into this state of non-being as you and this idea of the one merge. And Plotinus had this term for it, which he called kenosis, this merging with the one, this merging with God. And it developed over the time of Neoplatonism until it really hit its deepest point of negative theology, where God is beyond all of these things, beyond an identity. He doesn't have opinions, he doesn't have views, he doesn't have favoured people, all this kind of thing. So he doesn't go about nobbling people and knacking enemies. It's beyond all of that. But lesser gods and angels and other sources, they can deal with that. But the highest power, this universal source of energy, which can be merged with in these processes, is beyond all of it. And when you merge with that, then you are also getting rid of a whole lot of other things, but you're also allowing spiritual teachings to come to you from a source beyond this physical realm. And in the book that his student Porphyry wrote about Plotinus, actually called The Life of Plotinus, he talked about he would write as if he had another text he was copying from. And this comes up very, very often when people are referring to this idea of knowledge coming in. And it was like, well, where is this knowledge coming from? But it would feel like he was copying from a source that he couldn't see. We also see the same thing. Let's see what else is on my PowerPoint. So this is also the soul. So let's move back. So we see this idea of sitting in the power, which is a process that I first came across in the early 2000s, but it was developed. This chap on this side here, on Glyn Edwards, he was an absolute master of this, and he revealed this tradition to students at the Arthur Findlay College. And he was working with a trance medium at the time called Mark Webb. And there's some uncertainty about if it was 1998 or 1999, but I think it was probably 98. And Mark was in a deep state of trance, was a deep trance medium. Whether you believe in that or not makes no difference, but you know, that's what happened. And Glyn asked the control, the spirit who was speaking through Mark Webb, and said, are there any techniques, anything that students can do when they go home that they can get into this state of blending with this other world, with other consciousness? And the control, who was called James, he gave this technique and he called it sitting in the power. Now, I train a lot with Glyn Edwards. I know him he's in spirit, he's passed on now, but I knew him very well, and he had this most incredible nature. And you would go into these very, very long sessions of sitting in the power, where it wasn't really a meditation. And I would ask people, people would often ring me and they'd say, oh, I'm having difficulty, I'm trying to get into this idea of, psychic development, mediumistic development, and I find it difficult. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, well, I go to this circle once a week, and then we sit and we do a meditation. I said, well, what do you do in your meditation? And 9 times out of 10, the person would say, well, the lady leads it, or the man leads it, and we go down a leafy lane, and we meet a guide, and the guide gives us a gift, and it's usually a crystal or something like that. It's all very nice. And the idea of this practice is to go into this state of no mind, where you're not having visions of guides, you're not having visions of anything, kind of spirit people or guides or, sacred texts or words coming to you. It's a state of emptiness and complete dissolving into the energetic world around you. And I took it a stage further because I've got a background in all of these kind of weird stuff, kind of ancient Indian texts and practices. And I noticed, because Glyn would always say, this is a new technique brought to us by the spirit world. And I thought, no, it's not. This is in Patanjali. This is in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, where he refers to it as residing in one's own essence. And if we look into these sorts of techniques, we also see them in Taoist tradition. We also see them in the Jewish mystical texts as well. This idea of expansion into all reality and giving yourself to the possibility of nature, and not going into, kind of leafy lanes, going in your meditation and, doing all sorts of things. One of the things that seems to happen in meditation is this sense of dissolving into the universe, just dissolving into a universal power where you and it are one. So the power that you're seeking communion with, that is going to give you maybe inspiration, intuitive guidance, spiritual teaching, and any other ability, is within that realm. We're sitting here, and there are police signals whizzing through this. There's TV signals whizzing through this room. We're not aware of them. There are also energies coming from the realms of spiritual guidance, whether we want to call it the realm of the gods, the angels, whatever we want to call it, the ancestors, whatever we want to call it. all of these energies are around us and passing through. So in this sense of dissolving into that reality, then all of these other possibilities that are in this frequency, we can actually start to communicate with and feel as if we are blending with and getting guidance from. This is research that was done at the HeartMath Institute in America, where they came to this idea that, look at this, they have much more activity in a state of meditation where the heart is activated much more than the brain. I haven't put it on my PowerPoint because I knew I had a limited time. But what happened, I had some tests done with a Russian scientist who was looking into meditative states, trance and so forth. And I have the results at home if anyone wanted to see them. But what it showed was a restriction of brain function, a closing down of brain function, and an increase of heart sensitivity, heart energy and heart activity. And this happened time and time again in research, that the energy of the heart is activated to such a strong sense during deep meditation, deep blending, this universal power, that we can't help but feel as if we are connected to something at a heart level. So I would say, rather than concentrate on the third eye or any other area, that bring that energy down into the heart, and you can't go wrong, really. This idea of power flowing in, I like that because I just went on Google Images and I saw some really cool pictures. But these images, they all represent actual things that occur in meditation where we may invite or invoke that power into the self, in the sense of an introverted meditation, where we're going to place that power or invite that power into the heart centre, into the third eye, into the throat centre. And some of the research that I've done in my, because I'm looking at comparisons in early Jewish sources, where we see early rabbis in the mystical texts directing energy, the energy of God, into the heart, into the throat, and holding very strange postures and things like this. But they're doing very similar things to India gurus back in the same period. You know, there seems to have been an explosion of knowledge at that time, whether it was a natural outgrowth or whether there was a transmission of teaching makes no difference, but there seems to be similar ideas. Now, that is an artistic representation. That's a real picture. This is me. So this picture on this side, a really poor picture. But I had asked for, because I had to go and give a lecture on particle physics for an hour and a half. And I booked a speaker who revealed about 2 weeks before that it was going to cost $3,000, so we had to come and invite her. I said, don't worry, I will do the lecture, I will go and do it. Because I know cool stuff about that kind of thing, you know, so I'd been doing my makeup and I was really quite nervous. And I thought, let me just take a photo before I go out to give the lecture, make sure I don't look like a clown. And I took the photo. Now, as you can see, it looks like I'm doing this. I wasn't doing that in the photograph. I just took a straight-on selfie just to see, is my makeup okay before I go and meet the world? But this came in, this bolt of energy, and I went and I gave the lecture. Brilliant, really good. And this picture, which is not quite as clear, this is what looks like a flame coming in from the sky. This was taken outside my back door on Wednesday. So when we do these practices, we do get a lot of activity around us that can be photographed. Now, this particular picture of me has been looked at by lots of different people. It's been looked at, you know, people who are experts in dust, people who are experts in camera, you know, kind of problems and things like that. There's no explanation of what that is. But after I had given the lecture, I came back into my bedroom 2 hours later, and I thought, well, let's see if there's something still there. And I took a photograph, and you could see it leading through my nose, which I've not included on the slide, but you could see the last remnants of it coming out. So I wanted to just kind of give that as a little thing. So again, the same sort of idea. So this merging with the universe is lovely, and going into that state where all is possible. Now, going back to this idea of material coming in from long dead, kind of, Plato or, kind of ancient gods and so on. Doesn't matter what terminology you use, but we see also the same practices, the same things in, for example, the work of Proclus, where he looks at in his Moralia 7. That's just some of the things that you see in his deepening states. Anyway, never mind that. In his Moralia 7, he refers to experiences of mystics in caves, and these are the exact same experiences of meditating mediums, clairvoyants, people who are going into these development states. And one interesting thing that he refers to is that the person that he's referring to in this particular text, in the Trophonius Oracle, he was aware of someone standing behind him that he couldn't see, but he knew was standing behind him. And this is the typical experience of most developing mediums, that they're aware that their communicator is behind them, not in front of them. And this is an experience that happens time and time again, that the experiences are to do with the back of you. So visual imagery in deepening states is very, very popular. I mean, just a quick hands up. How many people get colours as they start to meditate? Quite a few of you. And it's so popular, it's so well known. This was just something I just pulled off the internet, but I thought this matches so much what people experience. And so we're back there again. I don't know what I've written stuff down for. But the idea of the one, there exists a principle which just transcends being. This is the one whose nature we have sought to establish in so far as such matters lend themselves to proof. Upon the one follows immediately the principle which is at once being, the intellectual principle. Third comes the principle soul. Now, just as these three exist in nature, so we must hold they exist for ourselves. This is from one of his, his only work, the Ennead. The one overflows, and its excess begets another in itself, begotten, turns back towards the begetter, and fills and becomes its contemplator. So these things are lovely to contemplate. There are ways that we can access this spiritual world through contemplating sacred texts. So whatever your personal scriptures might be, you will find a way to this other world through contemplating them. And Plotinus gave this sense of looking at beauty. Start by looking at nature, start by looking at sunsets and, desert scenes and architecture and things that lift the soul. Because when we start by looking at this, very odd thing is, as I was putting these pictures together, I looked at lots of things on, Google Images and so on. And as I spent ages, more than an hour looking at images, I could feel my heart opening, I could feel that energy flowing in by looking at beauty and things that I regarded as beautiful. So just bear that in mind. I won't go into that because I don't have time. But also this idea of the four Stoic virtues. So we move from this sense of beauty in nature to then concepts of things such as wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. These match these same tarot cards where we have these four ideas in the modern tarot deck. Wisdom has been replaced by the judgment card. It's the same concept. But I'm running out of time. I'm just going to say thank you and any questions.
Any questions?
Yes.
Thank you. Really enjoyed that talk. It was all cool.
Thank you.
My question, I guess, is a little bit controversial, but what's your perspective on like the conscious use of psychedelics in relation to the kind of thing you're talking about, like ayahuasca or psilocybin?
I have come across research from David Luke, and he's done quite a lot on looking at, you know, kind of psilocybin and these sort of things. And it does show that we've got the brain closing down and all the senses opening up. So, and it seems, I mean, a friend of mine, Anthony Peake, he's done some research on this, that when the brain starts to close down, we become aware of a much bigger reality beyond the physical senses. So it's not anything that I've ever investigated or done personally, but I do know people who've done this, and they have had incredible results. I'm more inclined to think, let's see what you can do yourself. I mean, for example, the Aboriginal practices, they don't use any drugs, but through using a didgeridoo and the breathing techniques that are needed to do that, create an altered state. I did training in Egypt where some of the practices that the Tsar priestesses that they do, and it's all based on breathing. Sufi practices based on breathing and chanting the sacred name, you know, the various combinations of the name Allah. But because you don't get a decent chance for a good breath, you know, you'll find that you will achieve a heightened awareness and go into a trance state very, very easily. And also things such as darkness practices as well. Sitting in a darkened room, you know, you will find that through sensory deprivation, you will, your mind will start to project things of your inner world. So sometimes there can be, you know, challenges you need to deal with, but sometimes there can be things that are helpful to you as well. So I hope that answers some of your ideas.
Yeah, if I could just add one more section.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So do you believe that we should be open to it, like on a kind of policy or lawful level?
I've got no experience of it, so I can't really say. But of the people that I know, I think that some people, when they've gone into indigenous cultures and they've done it as part of a ritual environment within that tradition, it is a really powerful experience. A bunch of friends sitting around after a party? No, I don't think so.
It's the one.
Anyone else?
Thanks.
More questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I just want to ask you, so it's just my very lay knowledge about this field, but the emergence of ancient wisdom, we also see it's termed as New Age practices in terms of, say, transcendental meditation or chakra meditation. So I'd like to ask you what your opinion is when people are joining these practices. Do you think that they are trying to reach a certain super consciousness as God, or are they actually trying to get more engaged with a particular higher self due to disillusionment with their physical experiences in modern day?
It depends what their motives are. I mean, a lot of people, they are seeking some kind of connection to a higher power, you know, whether we call it God or the ancestors or whatever what we want to call it. Those who are coming from perhaps a psychological background, they might want to refer more to kind of their own higher self. It doesn't matter either way what the motivation is, but the differences can be quite different. This idea of the New Age, I'm a little nervous of people who have got no experience of chakras, for example, and they read a book and they go, right, okay, you know, red and orange and yellow, and just meditate on these colours, and you know, Bob's your uncle. I'm very wary of that, unless you can go back to the original sources, such as Avanavagupta in the 11th century and so on. Look at some of those traditions, the tantric practices to do with this roadmap of the subtle self. I think it is important that you apply some caution when trying to open up these these avenues to knowledge. The same with the Kabbalistic sources in medieval texts. They would say, this is all really, really dangerous. And the early texts, for example, Hechelot sources and Merkaba texts in the Jewish tradition, they give a real strong warning. You know, they're not just picked up and put down. You have to devote yourself to it with a master who is going to lead you through all the pitfalls. So New Age practices, to me, I think, you know, don't just pick up a book and start doing something. That can lead to problems, psychological breakdown and all sorts of things that need to be addressed in kind of mental health areas and so on. But I hope that answers some of your questions. Yeah.
Right, we can have
Okay.
one more question.
Oh,
very
okay,
quickly.
yes,
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the idea that you can remove the freckles? And if the answer is yes, have you ever worked with anyone that's done this?
I've never come across that, no. I've come across ideas that, you know, rather than the basic 7, you know, maybe as many as 32, and that's definitely coming as a new age type thing. You know, the jury's out on that. I've got no experience of that. But I do know people have talked about, you know, kind of starseed connections to, you know, Pleiadian. You know, I've heard of it. Not really. My route is in the tradition, you know, the ancient tradition, not in modern adaptations.
Right, one last very quick question. Yeah.
Hi, you mentioned some research before. You mentioned some Russian gentleman was working with you on some research. Is it published somewhere? Can we find anywhere?
It was, what was his name? It was at the St. Petersburg University of Technical Sciences or something like that. But he developed equipment, this is kind of taking up time, but he developed equipment where he looked at people's potential for certain things. He even looked at you know, illnesses that may develop over time that people didn't have now. But he would look at somebody who was, you know, learning a little bit of sport, and he would look at their potential. Can this person be an Olympic athlete? And if the potential wasn't there, then, well, no, the training stops. And he did a lot of research in a lot of areas. And when I met him, he was doing research on trance and meditation. So, you know, that was something that it's ongoing, you know, but the Russians are very interested in the mechanics of, I can get this bit of kit and I can sit down with this person and I can then see what their spiritual state is. I can see what their chakras are doing. Because he even gave me maps of my chakras. And that when I did, when I was going into this sitting in the power practice, it looked like my chakras were in the next street, you know, and they were like here, because I was so expanded. I was not, you know, I was not within myself. And he said, if I saw that in a hospital, I would say this person's dying, you know, but not the case. But that seems to be an interesting thing, which has evolved from his research. But when he said, oh, I'll look at your chakras, I thought, oh, really, you know, do you? And I didn't accept it, and still I'm a little like that. But certainly things to do with all of the organs, I thought that was incredible, because it was basically just a sensor on your thumb and, you know, and finger. And it even looked at activity in your little toe and things like that. And, you know, your liver, your kidneys, all of the organs which were working, what was going on, what was happening in the body during this very quiet state.
Right.
So I forget exactly his name. It was a very long, complicated Russian name. Sorry.
Right, thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you.